Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning, gentlemen. How are you this morning? Such a fantastic day.
I'm waking up a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
Getting there.
I've with this year I've shifted a little bit. Making the lunches for the kids in the morning.
Oh boy.
Getting up a little earlier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So little story. Yesterday, I'm like, okay, second day of school. Put a little surprise in the lunch boxes. So I'm like writing little jokes on Post-its. Throw a little Hershey's Kiss in there for a little treat, right? Yeah. Get them off the bus yesterday. Hey guys, how was your day? Fine. Anything bad happen at school today? No. Anything good happen? No. Any surprises? No.
Not even in your lunch?
How was lunch? Fine. Nothing interesting in your lunch today? And then both of them were just like, no, not Oh, yeah. I mean, there was the joke. I'm like, all right, you guys killed it. Not doing it again today.
There you go.
It's a lot of extra effort. All right. Few and far between. The
welcome to every report building experience that I've ever done.
There's so many correlations.
Do you like your report?
Yeah, I like that report.
How is the day?
How is it? Did you enjoy your report? Did you like page 2?
It took me a lot longer to build that one.
On it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, you did that
like
thing
that
I
new
asked
interaction.
Yeah.
You did that thing I complained to your boss about. Oh yeah, thanks.
No more bookmarks. Any reports. That's it. We're throwing them out. No more bookmarks. You didn't like it the first time. I'm throwing them out. That's exactly how I feel with report writing.
It's so good.
Awesome. All right. Well, our main topic today is a good intro. Our main topic today is rolling out deployment pipelines for business intelligence teams. We're going to talk about how these things are working. There's some changes that are coming apparently down the pipeline for the ecosystem of deployment pipelines, which is very much needed. It's very good. But we'll kind of unpack this a bit more, talk about how we implement things today currently. What does this look like? And then that's going to be our main topic. With that, let's jump into a couple news items. Tommy, we've got a couple here. I have one here for the ALM toolkit. So on the blog for powerbi.com, the ALM toolkit has just recently announced that they are getting a TMDL support, so TMDL support for the ALM toolkit, which is very welcome because you do want to be able to point at 2 different projects and be able to compare the files the same way you were able to compare the files you'll be able to do for JSON or the BIM file. So that's extremely welcome. I will say this, Christian Wade, this is call out for you. Your almtoolkit.com website still is not secure, so I think you need a new certificate for your website. So Mr. Christian Wade, calling Mr. Christian Wade, there's an issue on your website. But other than that, everything else looks pretty solid. And there's surprisingly, ALM Toolkit is one that you have to install using the Microsoft installer. It's one of the only tools that you cannot use what I'm going to call a portable version of the tool. What portable means is you don't need the exe installer. You can just unpack the files and use it. I believe it's possible to make an ALM Toolkit as a portable version, but you would notice all the major versions of tools, Tabulator 3, Tabulator 2, DAX Studio, all of them come with portable objects or portable applications you can just go and install without having to use the installer. So we're working to see if there's a way we can fix that at some point, and maybe we can get a portable version of the installer as well. Anyways, any other news items?
Speaking of deployment pipelines, another article again, as soon as we finish our podcast, Microsoft drops usually some of their more favorite releases.
Let's just say they're trying to keep up with us. Let's just say it that way. Microsoft's just trying to keep up with the podcast. And you heard it here first. We already talked about pipelines on Tuesday. Now we get with that literally in days. Yesterday, well, actually, it was probably the afternoon of our talk about deployment pipelines. A new blog post.
Yeah. By the way, I've done enough things with AI. I can guarantee you that title came from AI. A leap forward in deployment efficiency.
Okay. I'm gonna after reading the article, I'm gonna definitely take issue with a leap forward. I think we took a couple steps, maybe a step if we're gracious here. Like, I don't think we're taking leaps at this point. I mean, I'm thinking leaps is like we're getting a lot of new functionality here. This did not feel like a leap forward, but I totally agree.
Yeah.
Leap forward is definitely feels like
a strong word.
Can't you run a website through? Is it AI or not?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know the whole article, but so the whole the changes that are coming out is really focused on the user interface, which I think we can all agree has been in need of a bit of a refresh in terms of, I think, a great segue or a conversation of what we're talking about today. But if you're just getting started with a deployment pipeline, and if you don't come from that kind of environment, it can be a little intimidating, and it's very easy to kind of break things the first time. So the idea of just really how you can actually manage that user, like all the different environments in your different workspaces, kind of goes in what they're already doing with task flows, or that same idea. So I like the unified interface there. And that's it. I think I didn't see anything else.
Man, so I hate to pile on, but I agree. I agree from the standpoint that it's like, oh, okay. Like if we are AI in articles, not saying you are, but what's been added section. The new design has a canvas area for the pipeline and an area for the selected stage content, including advanced capabilities. Now, mind you, when I think advanced capabilities, the following are not what I think.
Jeez.
For a better experience, like search, filter, sort, and zoom in and out.
Hey, guys, guess what? I got a good idea, guys. We're gonna add task flows to pipelines. There you go. It feels like they've just taken task flow work. They all actually look kind of like task flows as well. Actually, it looks kind of like task flows. There may be some monumental things under the hood that's happening here that I'm not observing from the article, and maybe I need to see it. Maybe I just need to see it and play with it a little bit. They'll see what's in there. As a side note to your comment there, Seth, yes, I read the words. I was very underwhelmed by the words. I went to the image and right-clicked, open image as new tab, and then zoomed into the image to look at all the icons and the things. Do you guys do that when they put out blog posts that you're like, I don't know what that looks like. The image is too small. The resolution is so small. And you zoom in to go see what's going on. Do you do that at all?
Periodically.
Okay.
Didn't this time. Why? What did you find?
I didn't find anything amazing, but there's some things in there that I want to enforce that I hope is actually in the solution based on their screenshots. So it looks like, honestly, to me, this looks like almost verbatim task flows. The cards look the same. The language is the same. So, okay, I get it. Fine. It's task flows on the top part. I was really hoping for more advanced options around code comparing different objects between the current version and the next version. You're able to get that inside a data model. So a data model can show you like the differences between, okay, what did you change? What measures were different? What things were added?
Speaking of places where ALM Toolkit would be really beneficial.
I know. So this is what I'm looking at. I'm going, okay, well, we have, when you zoom into the item, you now get this click the card that you want to be on and you get all the options in the card. I see the same options we had before. There's nothing different. Select related. There is the same button for comparing. So I can compare items, which again, I'm not sure how that works. So I'm actually very curious about the compare button on this. And can I compare a lake house? Like the definition of a lake house to a prior lake house? Can I compare a report to a report? Can I compare a semantic model to a semantic model? So I'm really interested. I want to see if I can do more comparisons between the objects and more objects, because honestly, that's where the value adds for me. I want to know what changed between the two items.
Yeah.
They have the deployment history, which is already there though.
Sometimes in these articles, though, there's some gems of people asking great things at the bottom. I just want to zoom in. There's one that says, "Can I get a data flows Gen 2 inside the new pipeline?" Pipelines. That's a great comment. It's made by
Mikel Carlo.
Mike
Carlo.
Carlo. Mike DiCarlo.
Yeah, I definitely made
My
a comment.
pseudo troll name online.
Literally, as soon as the blog came out, I trolled immediately. Hey, when did we get data? Does this mean we get data flows now? Because it's all new. You will realize that there is no reply and no response to my comment. So it's still out there in the open. And it did not get any thumbs up either. So
No thumbs up.
I would, hey, community, I would appreciate you. Please, I'm going to put the link in the description below.
9 thumbs down to it right now.
Chat,
Hammer that thumbs up.
Chat, we need to get some thumbs up here going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the article here in the post. So here's the post. Please go thumbs up the comments around Data Flows Gen 2. We need Data Flow Gen 2 support on things. Go smash that thumbs up button. Don't even like this video. Don't even subscribe. But we don't care anymore. Just go to the post and hit a thumbs up that we need some Data Flows Gen 2 inside pipelines. So that was interesting. But again, a lot of this was, it seems like just this is where I disagree with the article, right? The article said a leap forward. And what I saw was, it just seems like a really big redesign and shifting of where things go. It definitely, I will say this, looking at the screenshots and hearing what they're talking about, it definitely feels like a user functionality improvement, because the way you see things today in every single video, in every single deployment pipeline today, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't let me do what I want to do. One thing I would really like to see here. So in task flows, you can define the dependencies between different cards. And so I can have a card that says ingest data. I can have a card that says lakehouse, and I can build a card that is kind of just on the side that doesn't go anywhere. I really would like to see this task flow or this deployment pipeline allow me to have multiple quote unquote destinations for the same items on the deployment pipeline. So if you think about a deployment pipeline, you have like dev, I go to test, I go to prod. But what if I want to go dev, test, and QA and not go to prod, or pull prod directly from the test environment? Or what if I want to deploy, I want to deploy everything from dev to test to HR, dev to test to finance, dev to test to these other areas. So I think there should be more branching enabled in the deployment pipelines and give you more flexibility, because again, we're just code comparing two different workspaces anymore. This is all feeling very natural to me. There's no reason why I need to have only a single destination at the end of the pipeline. I should be able to branch off things wherever I want. Give me more flexibility in the deployment experience to make that work. So I'm not sure how they're going to handle that. I know there's a lot of challenges. I've been currently doing a lot of deployment things with Git and moving Git between different items. I will say it's extremely challenging to do things in the deployment pipeline space. GUIDs are changing all over the place. You've got different artifacts being made from one environment to the next. It is not a smooth experience the way it is today. So anything they can do to help that experience, I think I'll be very welcome and very pleasantly surprised if they can kind of deliver that. So yeah, I'm holding my tongue, crossing my fingers, hoping that they'll get to that level of detail in the deployment pipelines.
And I think structurally here, right? Like if there was a huge structural change to this, right, where all of a sudden you're incorporating the new paths, right, new options, new ways in which you can kind of leverage some of the stuff from task flows, or put them in the deployment pipelines, and we're preparing ourselves to for a much better user experience. That is a leap forward. But you can't claim that externally, right? That's a lot of tech debt, because we built it the wrong way the first time, or we built it this way, and now we pivoted and shifted this other way. That's going to extend things further. Like that's a teaser, right? Like, hey, with this release, you see that things are changing. Get ready, right?
Yes,
because our next release is going to be a huge leap forward. Whereas lackluster. Use your words wisely.
That feels better. That feels what this article is. It's prepare, something's coming. We're getting a lot of structural, that's what I should have heard the message.
Right.
Hey, look, the UI is changing. We're doing a lot of different things, and this is to prepare us for another big leap we're going to do in the future. That's what I wanted to hear. So it just felt like I'm almost sitting.
Yeah, and that's my gripe around advanced features, right? Like, is it advanced compared to the way it used to be because you couldn't do that?
Yes.
Well, yeah, it's great, but that's table stakes nowadays, right? Like if you don't have a search function, if you can't sort, if you can't zoom in and like that, people are going to be like, I don't want to use this, right? Like this is lacking functionality, as opposed to, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. Yeah. And that's the only difference is like, hey, improvements are improvements. making a tool better is making a tool better, but put them in the place that they need to be, because this is the same thing that like I push back in some cases of like the announcement stuff is if everything is a game changer, then nothing is. Right? Like every single time something comes out, like, oh my gosh, like it's the next big thing. Right? Then the next big thing isn't the next big thing.
Speaking of the next big thing, Tommy, you want to tell us more about this AI skills thing that you found that's the next big thing?
Maybe for another day. So
okay, maybe for another day. Tommy's still investigating the AI skills thing.
Yeah, if you are going to try out the AI skills, I think we'll start here. I think we've already had one enough of some constructive criticism for one part. So
start the next show with a little more.
Yeah, we'll do that on the next show. Yeah, my issues, my qualms with Microsoft. That's our new segment. But there's some limitations, some that you wouldn't expect in an AI skill, such as the ability to generally, look at your data besides just translating into a simple query.
Without getting into details, right? Because we can save that for another session.
Yeah, we can.
I think what Tommy you're finding is what I've talked about or referenced before, which is when is too early, right? And or that is especially true when there are competitive products on the market that do things, right? And there are base level expectations that people are having when you start slapping AI on technologies. And I think that's where that conversation is going to go.
Yeah. And I hope they expand like I said, I think that's a rabbit hole in itself. But I think we'll pause there because I don't want to get started with that. I don't I don't want to.
And this I learned from Seth, and I'm going to say Seth is a genius for this one. This is a genius move here. When you see a new feature come out, if you want to know how feature complete it is, or how much Microsoft knows the feature is complete, go read the documentation. Go to the what is it about page. Scroll down till you see this section called limitations. Read through the limitations, because that will frame a lot of again, a lot of these features are announced and you're like, oh yeah, this is so neat. I'm gotta go try this. Let's spend a lot of time figuring this thing out. When you read through the limitations, and I think, Tommy, that's where you kind of you're like excited about it and you kind of heard like, let's put the brakes on a bit here. Maybe not, because you read the limitations. And again, this is in preview. Things are going to improve. It's going to get better. But if your bullet list of limitations is long, more than 6 items, I don't know what the number is. There's a number out there somewhere. If your limitation is more than 6 items, are we really ready to release it? Is because this one's got a ton of them. I mean, we're all over 10 items here that they know that doesn't support this, it doesn't support that, can't do this. And I think that's the idea here. It's like when we're coming into a market with a new feature, if the feature is so brand new that there's really no expectations with it, it's easier to release a feature because there's no initial expectation. When you come in with it and this is another one of these plays where Microsoft is walking into the AI space where others have already set very good precedents in this space. It's, why not let me, why force me to use the Copilot one? Why not give me like an integrator that lets me integrate any kind of AI? Think of it like VS Code, right? It's a plugin. It's an add-in. It's a module. And I could say, well, if I want to use Cursor, I use Cursor. If I want to use OpenAI, I use OpenAI. If I want to use Copilot, I can. So you have this ability to kind of look at all the different features and drop into whatever you want to work on. So that's, I think my right now feeling of this AI thing is it's too hard and it's moving too fast to have any one tool be like the solution for all your AI needs. It feels like everything is moving so quickly. Again, this Cursor thing came out to me, hit the other day, like, this is amazing. You can build full apps with Cursor and all these back-end, front-end things. I'm like, what the heck? Are we really, seriously? Is this really what we can do right now?
So hold, one thing I want to lean into here is the genius of my statement, scroll to the bottom and read up on Microsoft Tech articles? Is that what that is? Hey,
maybe that's what we're talking about.
I'll take it.
I think the reason why is not to just bash whatever the company who's doing that.
No, but that's where you find the nuance, man. Immediately.
Right. Yeah. If I'm going to spend my time making this a skill for me, and investing in it and testing things out and tweaking it to actually say I'm very comfortable with that. Well, you want to make sure there's that said value. So I think it's something I'm going to keep my eye on, because the idea is completely needed, or the concept of what they're trying to do. I think that is actually a viable product that has a lot of use cases.
You know what you
The
should
way
do?
they framed it, yeah.
You spooled up a new blog. You should have a blog that says, "Hey, base level set of requirements if you're launching AI tools," and then maybe tag them.
Yeah, Kurt in the chat window has said he has also gone to write a new article. Welcome to Copilot. Mistakes are possible, right? So myths, magic, Copilot, and Power BI. So love the call out there. So Kurt, I love your work. You do a great job. So I want to say thank you very much for all the contributions to the community, the things you think about. We love working through your articles. The article was released on September 5th, I think it was. So just recently. But I will put the article in the chat window, so people please go check that out. Read the article, and I'm sure this will be a future topic for us somewhere. We'll probably review the article and go through it later on. And it's around that. Look at this. Look at what I'm wearing. I'm literally even wearing a Copilot shirt today. So like it's yeah, but mine's more of a sarcastic comment, right? Copilot told me to say it. It's kind of how things. That's how it works.
Great for the conversation today.
This is great for Copilot told me to say it's amazing. So that's good.
Hey, the Explicit Measures podcast, a life-changing experience.
Did the AI tell you to say that? I'm not sure if you're telling the truth.
Copilot.
All right. Let's jump into our main topic today. Let's talk about just deployment pipelines and how do we roll this out to the business team? What does this look like? And how do we interact with this concept of deployment and pipelines and environments? One of the things I think I maybe struggle with the most here is there is a cultural shift in companies that it's more of like, when do I need to start thinking about deployment pipelines? I know it's a premium license thing. You need to have premium for it to work. But aside from that, I think there's a maturity that needs to occur inside teams to even start thinking about pipelines. And so maybe I'd like to even talk about that as part of our day or conversation today, is just thinking about even where does that land? What is the break point from, great, I open everything from desktop, I publish everything from desktop to the service. And I think I had a conversation with someone recently around, are we at the place where we can build everything in the web now? Can everything that we build be entirely created in the cloud? And I think we're getting closer and closer to that day. Anyways, those are the kind of initial thoughts. Tommy, kick us off. Some initial thoughts and frame out the conversation here a bit more.
And I love the way you put that too, because it's deployment pipelines, but now with Fabric too, other advanced features, talking about when do you introduce that to a business team because they're owning their data. And we're coming with the framework or the assumption that they're probably not developer centric. They're probably don't have the concept of a development or QA test prod, and they may not have the same technical skills. But if they're continuing to own their data, and we talked about this in the self-service conversation a few podcasts back, there gets to a point where there's some questions that need to be asked and considered when it comes to actually scaling up a team.
Yeah.
That being said, deployment pipelines, but like I said, there's other features here, so I think it could be kind of a bit wider there. They all apply on, okay, we know there's training involved. There's going to be someone who has to own it. And basically, how do we introduce that, and what do we need to look out for?
I like it. Let's jump right in. Maybe we should do just a quick cursory overview. We've been talking about deployment pipelines. I assume everyone knows what they are, but let's just maybe do a quick feature overview of what they are. The idea of a deployment pipeline is it helps you move items or artifacts between one workspace to another. So the concept here is if you built everything in a single workspace, your models and your reports, you can publish an app from that workspace. You can have Tommy's amazing baseball workspace, because Tommy loves baseball and his statistics. So Tommy's going to make this incredible data set. He's going to go build some data engineering. He's going to use a couple of data flows. He's going to land the data in the lake, and then he's going to build a semantic model and a report or reports on top of it, right? If you keep all those artifacts in one workspace, which you can definitely do, how do you publish it and distribute it to the rest of your audience? You're going to have some consumers who want to access the model. Some consumers may want to access the data set. Others may just want to give me an app or just the reports at the end of it. And so what you do is you build an app on top of the workspace, and then the app then packages up reports. They can be the workspace reports can be different than the app reports because you have to publish them. You kind of get like a mirrored copy of them, and then you can distribute that to your people. I think the challenge comes from when you have that single workspace working environment. Any changes to your data sets potentially will break the reports in the app. So you can share the app to people and you break things. So what seemed to come out of that, design pattern was, okay, well, that doesn't really work. We actually need two workspaces. One workspace where I can do all my quote unquote development work, build new model things, fix the measures, literally break things like without having to impact anyone else. So I'm the creator of that model and content. I'm going to physically break stuff. Then there's a second workspace that is the released version. So you basically, from desktop, would deploy only things to dev when you're making changes. When you're happy with the changes, you would take your changes from dev. You would maybe go back down to desktop and deploy them directly into a new environment, another workspace. Again, the same pattern exists. Collect your things, publish an app, all those things are shareable things. So this became, I think, clunky in general, and people were confused about which workspace am I publishing things to. And to be honest, this is an IT pattern that does not exist in the business. When I was working in the business, it was like there's one file for the things. If you want a different version of the file, you just add a V1, V2, V3 on it. And we have SharePoint files or locations with like lots of versions of files of things you may or may not have broken. You want to keep history, it stays in one place. So there was no way for us to, in the business, to really think about these different environments. To be honest, when I was in the business, I was like, why do we need environments, man? This is so dumb. Seth knows this. We work together. Seth's like, you got to have like separation, dude. Like you got to separate the things. I'm like, it takes so much time to do that. Like, why would I want all this time to do that? Well,
I could literally hear your voice in my head.
Yeah. Why? It's like the birds from Finding Nemo, mine, but it's why? But that being said, we get to this place where we do need some separation. So maybe the business starts in this level of like, okay, let's build a development space where we can make things, break stuff, make changes. And once we're happy with those changes, then we can move them to a different workspace that we're going to release to other people. And so herein lies wow, looks like IT already figured this one out by having dev, test, and prod, and we should start borrowing that language. And that's where I think all these pipelines, and the initial pipeline only had 3 environments. Now we can have more. All these other things as well. So that's kind of how I see the progression of what a pipeline is. A pipeline allows people to build things in a vacuum in a small environment with low impact to the business. And then when you've completed the work that you have done, you're happy with it, you can then promote it to a different workspace and then widely distribute it. So that's kind of how I think about the models. Do you guys agree? Am I off base on there? Is something you would add? Did I miss something?
No, I think a big part of that too is also once organizations realizing that they have reusable data, and it's not just, hey, one data set, one report, I published that very simple flow, that maturity of, well, this model, we're reusing this data all the time, and everything, we have this idea of dependencies.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have, and this, I don't want to call it master data, but when you have more source data that really starts becoming integrated for that team, or at least for what they're looking at, then this conversation too is not just the environment, but we have to really make sure about these few things because it affects everything else. And that's just usually the kind of the common maturity. So I think with that being said, if I were to start with a business, and all the things, I love what you said, Mike, and they come to you, or they're have a kind of the initial question of, hey, is there a better way to do this? Do we have, in a sense, like a prerequisites that we would look at that team to say whether or not, whether, again, from what the data to their skills to the structure of the team, that you're like, can we even consider this?
Great question. First thing I'm going to react to you is the first one you said. When does the business come to you and say, we need better control around us? They never do that. Yeah. This is more of I feel like this feature, deployment pipelines or pipelines in general, this whole idea of separation of development and production things is more of an afterthought for the business. And that's okay. But what happens is someone gets burned with a report that totally gets bonked or broken or does not work, or it stops refreshing. And you know what? Just give me one Friday afternoon when someone publishes a change and stuff stops working and someone needs important data at the end of the month. Just give me one of those. We only need one example for people to get really bent out of shape to be like, you know what? That probably wasn't the best idea. So one, no releases on Fridays. And two, if you're breaking stuff, we can't be breaking things that are in prod. And there's a whole bunch of funny memes and shirts and things like, I only work in prod. I only develop in prod. Like it's a thing. Like sometimes you don't have that rigor to build out multiple stuff. So the first comment is, Tommy, does the business ever come to us and say, we need a better way of doing it? No, they don't. This is more of a forced action on them when they have felt some pain that I feel like, hey, by the way, this is more of like, let me show you some light. There's a better way to do this. So that being said, now it's more like, hey, look, you guys had some pain points. Here, let me introduce you to this thing, right? So, when does the business start thinking this way? And I think you start with the concept of separation of the apps and the models and being able to build them in a different environment. And so we don't want to lead the business with a code first conversation because they'll get lost. It's not really relevant. We really want to kind of illuminate the idea of like, look, this is where we build, this is where we publish from. And I think a lot of times the business does a good job starting with a dev production type pattern. Build things in development, get things right, and then move it over to production. And that's when we introduce it. Now, I think to your latter question, you said, what skills do we need? I honestly think there's not a huge barrier to skills in this. It's just not a major training thing. I think you can run people through. There's actually a pretty good learn.microsoft.com, I think, group that says how to use a deployment pipeline. Just going through that, I think, would give them the skills they need to be able to understand what's going on there. So it will be some initiative for the people to learn how to do that. Now, the center of excellence definitely needs to play a game here. The harder question to answer, I think, is how do you know when content's ready to move from dev to production? What does that look like? And how do you regularly make content move through from dev to prod? I've been in a lot of organizations where we wait too long in dev and the changes start mounting bigger. And all of a sudden you drop this huge release down to production and everyone's like, whoa, so many things have changed. I don't know what's going on. So I think you really do want to, if you're going to go down this mentality of pipelines, you want to have think about the releasing pipeline. What is our cadence? How often will we release things? And I think, Seth, you've talked to me a lot about this one and talked a lot about this as well, is you need commitments back to the business of, you've asked for a lot of features on this report or this data set. I can't give you everything at once. Let's break them down into smaller task level things, and I'll slowly release those weekly to give you things in your hands to react to. And I think that's very reasonable because there's maintenance things on other things you're building. There is building new reports. There's building new data sets. There's cleaning up other things. There's a lot of stuff your team is doing in addition to just getting features out for one report for one team. And sometimes if they miss the opportunity to clean and check your report, they get stuck back at the end of the queue. And the BI team says, look, get back in line. You didn't review as quickly as we needed you to, and we can't make now new changes. So you got to wait again.
Yeah, but that, like, I'm following you, and I like a lot of the thoughts. There are some things that seem to vacillate between BI team versus business team, and to me, those are separate things. Like the last comment about like release schedule planning implies a sort of planning, which frankly
probably doesn't happen.
Wider audience in business, not a thing. So like to back up, like, or I would say is a secondary lean in of here's how you start to organize your life. If you're a report person in the business or have a reporting team that lives in the business as opposed to a centralized.
Sure.
I do like to draw back a little bit on the prerequisites. I agree. Pain only is one of the fastest things that will move businesses in a direction. The only caveat to that is depending on how large the pain is. Is it a small burn and it's just like your department, your area, you broke things and like you took things down and your manager's pissed? Or did you burn your whole leg, right? Like, and the business now recognizes that key pivotal reports are not available because something happened. So that absolutely is a change driver, where how do you solve that problem? Deployment pipelines is a way you can manage that or mitigate that problem in the future. So I think a recommendation here is absolutely, if this has happened to you before, look into deployment pipelines. Like, this will allow you to break an environment completely and then go, oh, we should probably fix that before there's ever a production impact. But there's a lot of overhead here. And we've talked about, like, what are, like, you're introducing an IT centric thing to the business. And that's going to be a challenge, because what is the value to the business? Well, the value and the pain point is, well, we don't want to burn ourselves again. And we've been here before. And that's why we have this new process. Without that, though, I think it is a little bit more challenging, and a little bit more focus has to be driven into, like, convincing or like, it's a byproduct of a lot of the data maturity efforts that organizations should be investing in, right? You have a COE, you identify that there are teams that potentially have, like, you set the criteria where teams are hitting a threshold where the reporting that they're generating is business critical, whether that's in their units or, like, there's a wider spread of the reporting in predominantly what I think we're talking about, like, more of a self-service, or, you know, the organization's large enough that it has separate teams of individuals building key reports, that something like the rigor of deployment pipelines, which is kind of a tech, introduction, is important and paramount. You could, like, thresholds of, like, yep, you're definitely in an area where you guys need to be using deployment pipelines, so that you're mitigating the business impact if something were to go wrong. So leaning into those two, I'm not a big, like, hey, let's just rock it until we hit the pain point, because sometimes those can be extremely severe, and it's never worth somebody's time. Like, oh, something broke. Well, there goes your weekend. Go fix it. Right?
Not
like,
fun. It's just not
it
fun.
sucks.
No.
It sucks.
Yeah.
And I think outside of those business drivers, the third that I would be is if you're listening, right, and you're a report writer, report builder, like, this is always something good. At least have a dev area prod in internal ways, because this saves you and your time from, being, bogarted. The challenge, having said that, okay, like, those are, I think, are the cases where, like, here are the prerequisites, are the things that are going to initiate change in the business, because in large part, there's this wide disparity that is ever increasingly fascinating to me, where when the business looks at technology, it always demands planning, it always demands estimation, it always demands execution. But when the business looks at itself, it's like squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. It's like everything's on fire all the time. And rarely am I interacting, and this is gross generalization, so bear with me if you're a business person and you're like, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to.
This is not true at all.
But it is. It's like you're like,
it
is a struggle. It is a struggle on both on when you play both sides, to not have people that have a plan, that are following their own processes, that have the same rigors around the way they manage their day to day. And this is where I think the value of some of the things that people who live in technology can start to introduce, that are extremely valuable to business people. And if you think about Power BI, it's that thing. I'm fast. I'm going to, just whip this stuff together, and I'm going to shoot it out to the service. I'm going to share it with people. Well, this is one of those just checks and balances, right? It's a simple check. Okay, I published it, I'm validating things, and I'm pushing. I think there's a lot more in the nuance of, like, what are they actually checking versus professionals who are building reports, because I think there's a wide variety of potential differences in there. But I've talked enough. I'll pause.
I find it humorous when I asked the prerequisite question. At least initially, you guys took it as, what do we need to get them started? And the way I was actually asking it was, what are the deal breakers where it may not work for them? Because Mike, everything you said, I 100% agree with, but you were coming still with the mindset of a developer. All the words that you used were words that people in development use. I mean, it's the world we live in, right?
Well, I mean, this is also,
Oh.
this is our moniker, right? Act like the business, but think like
Right.
IT. So the business is going to no, it's the other way around, Seth. I know you want
like
the other way.
business, act like IT, think like the business.
Yeah, that's not right. That's the wrong way to say it. Act like the business, think like IT. You want to. I like to go fast, get things done. Tommy, to your point, right? But this is a good practice, and what Microsoft is doing is taking the technology and commoditizing it so that everyone can use it. The same thing with visuals. Visuals and reports were only built by like a few people in the BI team. You came to them with your request. I want this data, these KPIs on this page. They had to curate all that. And what happened with Power BI is now everyone can do it. Everyone can build their own dashboards, reports, and paginated reports. You can build your own artifacts. So the self-service thing becomes more accessible when the UI becomes easier to click. I'm not having to write code. I don't write a bunch of things. It just becomes easier to use. So I think you can solve 80 to 90% of the problem by providing technology to that business team.
Sure. But where I was going with that is I think there's a big conversation too on what I would call them the deal breakers too, where you may have a team that has a lot of pain, but it could be also them driving off a cliff every time. It's very much their fault or their infrastructure. So they could have those pains of breaking things, but I think it's really important too to look at like two factors. If you're going to say, let's get them ramped up, or this is a good candidate to get started with more advanced features in the service. I think one is look at what they're building now, because they may have such, and trust me, I've seen it, such a wonky the way that the reports and everything is already located in Power BI that the amount of time you'd have to migrate things over. It's not just, we're going to just move those reports to this workspace, you're done. A ton of either, well, we have this Excel file that's located here. We built that one report in the dashboard, so we'd have to move it here. And I think there's a whole migration that you have to look at, because if you want to talk about technical debt, look no further than a business trying to do very advanced things. So that's the first one. I think the other side of this too is the cultural thing. Just because people are building Power BI reports, or the people doing it, does not necessarily make them IT or technical. There are a lot of people today who are responsible for their teams to build a lot of data where either one, that's not their foray, or they have everything to do, or their primary role. And even if they have those pain points and they're still doing things that are critical, I think there's some kind of like, okay, we know you're guys having this pain points, but if you were to go down this road, it's a bit of a journey, because there's a lot of work they're going to have to do. Are you okay with, or are they going to be more, I don't want to say gung ho for it, because again, to your point, Mike, there's a lot of hand holding here, but
initially, I think this is, what I want to be clear is the barrier to get into this space, to think this way, is not very hard. I think if you generally step back and say, let's just talk conceptually, like what we're trying to do here. Do you want to build things without breaking someone else's report? The answer is yes.
Sure.
Okay. We all agree upon the concept of like what should be happening here, whether you call it dev, tech, whatever. Maybe my words are too technology and developer centric, but regardless, at the end of the day, simple concepts are, I want to be able to change my model. I want to be able to rename measures and add things or delete stuff without impacting what has already been produced. That's the core principle. Many people grab onto that, understand it. I will say this, and I think this is a point that Seth, you've made to me as well. In all situations, anytime you're deploying a pipeline of things, it's going to slow down your process. It will take it longer to do things. And the only way you can speed that back up is automation. Sorry, go ahead, Seth.
No, and I think that's the main sticking point, though, right? Because
I agree.
If to Tommy, I think you're reiterating some of the same concepts. Like what is going to drive a team in this direction, and what we're implying here is not only are you starting from the vast majority of the time, you're not starting from scratch. Right. So there's work to get into deployment pipelines to get this set up and working and running. And the only net benefit is that you potentially could not break something. Now, In the technology world, that makes a ton of sense. In the business world, that's a blocker to me dedicating more time to solving some problem that I have to shift into, or I have this laundry list of, things that I have to do. And what you're introducing in my process is something that's going to slow me down. Right. And then, and I think this brings up my secondary point. If I'm a self-service user of Power BI, how much of Power BI do I actually know, Tommy? Right. And this is where I think it is hugely important, like how evolved reporting teams or reporting people are in the business units, because if they are more advanced, then this would make more sense. But if they're not, which I would argue is probably a wider audience, right? I'm introducing steps to not break something, but as I'm moving from one environment to the other, am I actually validating or testing anything? I'm in the does it work mode. I built a model because I have to relate these tables together. Not that I understand that there's different ways I can relate them together, or I'm doing bidirectional because I don't know that one should only have a unique record, so I don't have a properly formed model. So like as I'm making changes to get the answer, because that's my intent as a business, I need an answer. I need to get this stuff to work. How valuable is that only from just the break fix, right? And how much am I actually validating or checking as I'm going through a deployment process where in a more robust team or space, you are going through those checks and balances. You are testing, you're vetting, you're doing all these things because you're thinking about the impact of what you're building. And I'm not suggesting that all teams aren't doing that if you're not part of a central BI team, but I'm saying in large part, I think there's a lot of Power BI users that are getting value out of the reports that would look at this and go, I don't understand. Like, why are you making me go through this? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, and I love that, because just to your point earlier, Mike, about the V1, V2 versions, there's a lot of teams like that, and I was one of them back in the day, where I had don't use this report kind of one. V1, this is when we did this in my SharePoint, and without the, I mean,
what they do? What they do? It was production.
Yeah, that was kind of
you put it out there, and people started using it.
This V1 version. And I just wanted to make sure in case something happened. But if you're coming from that mindset, I would be so concerned without, I think maybe there's the proper kind of journey for them on. Of course they would break something in a pipeline. And to your point, especially if you're putting it out there for process sake and not because like, what are you actually doing in here? Are you actually having some process here? Because guess how easy it is for them to go, oh, I just need to publish this to production now, because they've never had guardrails on that or that concept there. So unless I think there's kind of like that two critical things. What the training involved, not just the training, but I wouldn't just do like, hey, let's learn pipelines today. You'll be great. You definitely won't break anything or publish something to production or, try to find out what's different with the source code. Good luck here. There are so many ways to break a pipeline. If you're not familiar with, again, I think that more how critical those versions, version history is and what you're actually trying to do. Again, especially if you're coming from V1, V2, V3, and I have to just give this out to the user right away. And I think that's a really critical part for me, that where I don't want to call it hesitation, but this is more than, okay, this is where you guys are at. We're going to build a pipeline for you. We're going to do a 2-hour training. Have at it.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I think that's easy at it. I mean, I think it's the idea of like, what pain do you have? That pain will get introduced at some point. Show them a better way. Here's how it works. And actually, I think this is a very logical, easy step, not hard to think about. And there's also a difference here too, Tommy, between, are we talking about self-service reporting? Are we talking about central and certified reports? Yeah. I keep putting a very big barrier between those two things. This is not required. I would say my opinion here is very not required to have deployment pipelines in self-service reporting. Even departmental reporting. Maybe you want to use it. Maybe we're at the decision where you're big enough and your team is capable of being able to do those things. maybe you use it or not. I don't really know. It's your decision in your department who's leading that area. If you're central BI, for sure you're using this one. If you're creating certified content, for sure this is part of the process. So I definitely do think there are different reports. And again, I've said this before. I feel like Power BI content creation is like a pyramid. And Matthew Roach has done a really good job of like enterprise grade content. That's the apex of the pyramid, right? I have a handful of data sets that are very large, difficult to manage, and it is servicing the widest number of audience of people, right? The larger the audience of that report, or the more important those audience members are of that report, the more important you want to push that to make it certified. If you just have a report being serviced by, being used by 3 or 4 people, a department, a team, a small group, I'm less inclined to spend a lot of effort to add the extra effort of deployment pipelines into this. So, when my question at the beginning of this was, where's the right breakpoint of when I start really pushing for deployment pipelines? Well, for sure, if we're talking and communicating data culture back to the business and saying, I'm going to build central things with a certification on top of them, we will use deployment pipelines. And it actually adds a lot of validity to that team to say, we have a process to handle updates, testing of those updates, and releases or versions of that report. To me, that's a requirement of the Center of Excellence to say, when we are doing certified content, it goes through this process. And that's a data culture decision.
So I think a good place to go here, unless there's anything on where we're at to focus on, but let's talk about that rollout then. Let's talk about the rollout, or what does it look like for BI or the Center of Excellence to phase or what roll out deployment pipelines to a team? Again, coming from someone who may not be as familiar with this, even if it is self-service, and we'll take the assumption it's more than just one report. What phases do we roll it out in?
What phase do you roll it out in?
What are the phases that you would actually roll out a pipeline to the team? Like, what are we doing to get them started?
So
and be self-sufficient in it.
Well, I would say, dev test or dev prod is probably what you're giving to business unit level teams, right? So you're a department, you're a business unit, you have a leader or someone who knows how to do Power BI things. Like maybe they've been working on it for a while. They know how to build reports. They can build models. Great. We're now starting to build a single model and multiple reports, or we're going to build a model and let the team consume and build their own things on top of it. Great. Let's do that. To me, that is a great opportunity to do dev and production. So the developers can build things they need to build. They can test the data inside those elements and then push it over to a production environment and then have it run that way. I think if you're going to certify things, I think you're going to have a minimum of 3 environments: dev, a test, a QA environment, and then a production environment. And the reason for that is, what I really want is I have the data changes. So there's 3 things I care about when I'm doing deployment pipelines. I care about the infrastructure. Is it a lakehouse? Is it a semantic model? Is it a report? The infrastructure, building the pieces of hardware that are just kind of as easy as clicking a button and something shows up. That's one thing you're building. The second thing you're building is the code. So if I have code in a notebook or have code inside the pipeline, there's the code that defines how to transform the data. And the third thing is the data itself. The data itself gets versioned as well. So what I really want is I want development to be a sanitized version of items, and then I want test to be a copy of data from production, but a very small window of it. So I want like 2 months, 3 months, something representative of what production is doing, so that way people can go in and test the numbers, make sure the year totals are what they should be. We're not missing any data, those kind of things. And then I want production to be like all the data that we care about, and we said we're going to commit back to the business. So in my mind, I'm thinking there are the changes between the environments, between dev and test and production, are really around what is in the data inside the infrastructure, because we're going to assume all the infrastructure pieces are the same. The semantic model is named Tommy's baseball data in all 3 environments, right? The report is named, why New York Yankees is a mediocre team in all 3 reports. That's
the prod, but yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. Tommy just ignored me. He's like, everything you said, Mike, is now null and void.
Never makes it to prod.
Never makes it to prod. But that's my pattern there. That's what I'm thinking, how the pattern works.
I would break things out in a little differently. So phases, like fundamentally, the team needs to understand the different components of what is in a deployment, right? To Mike's point, model, report, like all of the things that they would need to worry about. And in large part, like that's table level stakes, right? Fundamentals of a deployment process and why we do them. That's probably a foreign concept altogether. What the actual process of building the pipelines is, right? Like here's the features and functionality of how we go about doing that. And then followed with like, how do you migrate? Like all of the things that are in the current workspaces, like building on what are the different things? How do these things work? How do we get them into this framework, right? Because there's rules and things that have to be followed in order for the deployment process to work correctly, and then build a migration plan. Because ultimately, you need to understand how long it would take when you do the start to finish and discovery and all that kind of stuff. I think we're rolling up on time, but like ultimately, I think the three key things for me, when I think about this from trying to engage business teams, right, into this, is if you roll this out, it has to be solving a problem that resonates with the team, right, with the business and the business teams. Otherwise, what you're trying to do is implement process for process sake, and you're going to have a hard time getting teams to adopt. I think there are a lot more data literacy efforts that I would focus on way before this to just raise the level of how do you work with data? What are these models that you're trying to create? What are the capabilities of this tool? Like, so to me, this is a little bit further down the path of trying to integrate teams. But to Mike's point, I think this is another area where certification levels that are set by a COE or by teams to say, hey, if you want to graduate to the next level, this is a prerequisite for you to share to a wider audience or get this badge of certification, because then you're declaring to the business that there's some controls around how you deploy things.
I totally agree to that.
I'll add on to that.
Solid points.
Completely. The only one thing I would add to what you said, because I love the first one where it's design and trained, but I would add the roles where we're going to really establishing who's doing what and why.
Owners.
The ownership of it. Again, and I think one of those things is if you can't establish clear owners because either no one wants to do it or there's, for whatever the reason, it may not be a good candidate for deployment pipelines just on how they're currently built or how the team's currently built. But that design, the plan, talking about, again, why are we doing this? And we're not just putting this here for process sake. And I would imagine the last part of this too is a little bit of oversight by your center of excellence too. Once it's finally introduced into the system, into the environment, where there is a bit of a handholding in the beginning. Like I said, and the only reason I say that because it is very easy to do deployment pipeline, but it's also very easy to break things. So their first few versions that they go through, the first few things that they're actually pushing, and I love the idea of just starting with a dev and prod, but just walking them through that, walking with them the first time or first few times, so they're comfortable with that and they're aware of how things can break as well.
I'd agree with that. All right. Well, I don't have any other final thoughts. I think this has been a good conversation going through the deployment pipeline experience, kind of really teasing out what's happening here. I think, honestly, I will say it is really good information to get into this stuff, learn about it. If nothing else, go check out some videos or do some learn.microsoft information about this. Deployment pipelines, I think, are a solid feature. I like where it's going. It's going to continue to get better. And I'm very pleased. One thing that we say a lot in the podcast is if you want to know the direction of Microsoft and where they're going, look at what they're doing and how they're building new blog posts and what content they're building on top of. Watch what's being built. That will tell you where they're investing their time and their people and their money. So this is very welcoming. I'm very pleased to see deployment pipelines getting some more investment and time and feature in building. If you like this podcast and you thought this was fun, if you enjoyed the conversation here and you agree that the Brewers are the best team in the baseball league, if you do agree
in the baseball league, that's
in the baseball league, yeah, that's how much I follow things, right? The baseball league, when they score goal units. If you love that kind of stuff and you want to tease Tommy more, feel free to chat. You're more than welcome to do things. Tommy's very sad about my comments there, but anyways, we'll fight it out in
Well,
the games. But
I
that
mean, I
being
think
said, make sure you
biggest-
follow, like, and subscribe. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
what's actually going on this weekend? I could either say go Pack Go, but it's where I'm at, the Bears. So Bears. All right. So you can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question or idea or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. And finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of powerbi.tips or on all other channels. Yeah.
Those things.
Ah!
We'll see you
That
on the
made-
social media things. Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll see everyone next time. We appreciate your ears and have a great day.